we can, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan, sister.
Jazakallah khairan. So let me know, inshallah, about the sound. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Subhanallah, when I put this presentation together, it was, near the events, October 7th. And I was thinking about how I can show up for my community during these challenging times. And as I was forwarding the title of the talk to the different masajids, we started out by saying, let's call it psychological resiliency during challenging times. And then subhanallah, as time went by, I realized that these are not challenging times. This is just dunya. This is the nature of dunya. There's nothing shocking about dunya doing its thing. So then I thought about, how about psychological resiliency because of we're waking up, because of sobering times. And subhanallah, as I have done this presentation in many different communities, many different Muslim communities, the stories I heard from the different people indicated that subhanallah, we are in so much pain that is also very sweet pain. And inshallah, as this ensues, I'll try to explain that a little bit better. But just to give you an idea, when I was putting this presentation together, just before that, I was commissioned by Stanford to put a curriculum together on the science of pain and pleasure. So here I am, I'm working on, trying to come up with something on what is pain. And then these things, and then this happened. And I remember as I'm learning about the events, not being able to swallow, feeling that my heart is really in my throat. And it was just like the two things happening together was interesting. I think that it's really important to ask, how are we doing? And Palestine didn't come, all the atrocities, the genocide, all this pain didn't come a la carte in a vacuum. Like everything was going perfect. We were experiencing nothing, and this happened, and all of a sudden we felt pain. We, like everybody else in the USA, we, like everybody else in the entire world, just finished going through a pandemic, right? We're no exception to that. So I think Kaiser, my insurance, sent an email sometime in May saying that the pandemic has ended, whatever that means. But we went through 3 years of a lot of pain, physical pain, biological pain, psychological pain, familial pain, societal pain. When we kind of try to think okay, we weren't a part of this, we allow people to dehumanize us, to say that our pain doesn't matter. But just like everybody else, we are a part of the statistics that says 1 every 5 people suffers from a psychological burden problem as a result of the pandemic. Muslim Americans are included in these statistics. 1 every 3 is struggling with long-term, long COVID symptoms. I am one of the 3, right? Cognitive fog, the chronic fatigue, the breathlessness, the oxygen hunger. Some of you are nodding because they know exactly what I'm talking about. We're still parts of these statistics. And then we have our own specific pains in our Muslim community in the United States, in the West, like the Islamophobia. It didn't start when 9/11. It was exacerbated by 9/11. Like issues about concerns about raising our children to be righteous, right, with taqwa. Like all of the stuff that was happening with gender, that just happened before this. Like all of this was happening, right? And all of this was causing us concern, to say the least, if not pain. Then on a personal level, in our own homes, we have our own challenges. We have our own marital challenges. We maybe are, some of us are maybe waiting for a diagnosis. They did a test and they don't know if they have cancer. Some of us are, during the pandemic, during all of this, they're also struggling with raising a child who is differently abled. So all of that is happening, right? And then on top of all of this came the disaster that's happening in Gaza. But I don't want us to make it sound like nothing was happening and this is the only pain, because that is a part of making people contributing to our pain is not really painful. Like subhanallah, they did this study where they asked people to assess the pain of patients. And if the patient was black, that people thought that they felt less pain. They even felt that if they bleed, their blood would coagulate faster. Do you know who filled out the survey? It was doctors, residents who filled out the survey. So, and that's why it's really important to really own our pain and say there's still other pains, right? And certainly what's happening now is tremendously very painful. So when a stressor happens, when something shocking happens, right, like what happened earlier at the concluding first week of October, our body goes into kind of like this shock of like, can I deal with this? Is this something I can fight with? Or is this something I need to run the other way? And your body creates all this energy, so you're able to run away from the problem. The problem is when this was happening, we're watching the videos on our laptops, sitting in our chair. So as our body is creating all this energy so you can run away from your pain, from whatever you see that's dangerous, you're not doing anything with this energy. As a child, you will feel antsy in the classroom, hyperactive. As an adult, you will feel this immense feeling of frustration inside you because this energy has no outlet, right? And it's hard to explain this at a conscious level because a lot of this is happening beyond our consciousness. طيب, our body is excellent at dealing with a stressor and washing away all the chemicals, everything from our body within 90 seconds. But what about when the stressor doesn't go away? Like we're over 60 days now, and it was started beyond the 60 days. We just have to go to like October 6th, right? Then what's going on? Well, with chronic stress, we're not as good at dealing with stress that goes on and on and on, and stress that doesn't have an expiry date. Like we have no idea when this is going to end and if it is going to end in our lifetime. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Well, then what happens? Well, what happens is your body starts to have internal damage. Like pretty much every organ in your body will be affected by that chronic stressor. These constant video streams that we watch, this constant feeling of helplessness and frustration. And then your life is shortened, but also you have a higher chance of pretty much every disease, inflammation, pain, and cognitive fog. Like you are not being able to think clearly. I had, after one talk, these university students who were unfortunately going to one of the Zionist schools, UCLA, and they found it very difficult to focus on studying on their exams, right? And I'll offer some of the tools at the end of the presentation that I was able to share with them. So then there's this idea that, and I taught psychology of stress for many years. This idea is that if you expose your kids to stress, they become stronger, right? They become resilient, kind of like a vaccine. Right? Is this true? Well, this is partly true. So if our children, our youth are exposed to hardships, stressors, trials, but they go home to a comforting home, to a supportive mentorship and adults, they actually become resilient. They actually become resilient. So then that stressor, the hardship actually strengthens them as they get older. But here is the problem, is that as you're watching these videos online, your loved ones come home, your children from school, and they say, Mom, Dad, something happened in school. I want to talk to you about it. And you say, not now, later. But later never comes, right? We all do this. We're all sitting at home for hours. It's, one reel, one video after another of horrendous things. Horrendous things. And what happens is our compassion gets exhausted. Our rahmah, our mercy, our compassion gets dried up. So when that child comes home, you have no more love, no more compassion to give out. You're burnt out. So it's kind of like our homes have become like this emergency room, right? You get all these emails from all the organization, urgent appeal. Urgent, right now, needed. It's become, our mind has become like we live in an emergency room. the problem is that the person who is seeking to be healed is coming to somebody who's already bleeding on them. So everybody's bleeding on everybody, right? The person that's providing the healing and the person that's needing the healing, right? We're bleeding on each other in the living room, on the dining table, on the bedroom, everywhere. So as we desperately want to connect with each other, we just don't have the compassion energy to connect with the loved ones that we desperately need to connect with. And this is an actual phenomenon that was studied heavily during the pandemic. That's called parental burnout. When parents are burnt out to basically love their children, okay, which is been happening a little bit with what's going on. So that brings us to the other side of the question. Well, what about children who face stressors and hardships and bullying at school, or suspended because of saying free Palestine, or like the second grader who's sitting lunch table having lunch with her friends and they're asking each other, what does your dad do for a living? Very benign question. It seems like an innocent question. And a second grader says, well, my dad makes the parts that kills Palestinians. Right? You're a second grader. The world to you is black and white. The world to you is good and bad. That's what is how somebody like under 11, that's how we think. Very dichotomized. And you come home and you say something happened in school. I need to talk to you. And then I say to the child, let's talk later. But later never comes. Both of us continue to bleed, but both of us need each other so desperately, more so than ever. Then what does happen to then these children, these youth that come home to a parent that's burnt out, emotionally burnt out? Well, then that becomes a generation that has this long trajectory of depression and anxiety, increased suicidal ideation, which is certainly not the ummah that we want to build for ourselves. And that's why I think it's really, really critical for us as parents, for us as educators. You could be a teacher. For us as anyone that is guiding our youth, guiding our children in a position of wanting to offer compassion to the loved ones, to be very mindful of how much compassion was spent during the day and mindful of how much do I want to leave for the people who desperately need me, including myself. Because we will not benefit from an ummah that is anxious, depressed, and is thinking, contemplating ending her life. Wallahi al-Azim, I was in this community. I'm never going to forget the face of this Palestinian woman. This is a Palestinian woman who's an immigrant. And I gave this presentation and we sat in a circle with the women and we talked. And she started to scream. She started to yell. She started to hit her chest. And then she said, I really want to end my life. This was a grown woman. She was saying it in Arabic. And she was just saying really concerning things. So that's why it's really important to be mindful, because what happens is, things go slowly and we don't notice. Do you know and I don't know if I put it in this presentation, but do you know the story of the boiling frog? You know the story of the boiling frog. So the boiling frog, if the water is kind of lukewarm, the frog can jump out of the soup and save itself, right? But if the water is going to boil slowly, the frog actually becomes frog soup. The moral of the story is, if you are in this lukewarm type of stressors every day, here and there, it gets to a point that there's no return. By the way, biologically and psychologically, you get to a point that reversing becomes really hard. Just years and years of work, if even possible. So it's really important to realize oh wait, I think I'm on the beginning steps of being burnt out and this trajectory, and I don't want to go down this trajectory because my ummah needs me, right? Because I need to contribute to building an ummah that is going to transcend this present moments and take us forward, inshallah. What is really scary about parents when they burn out is that they distance themselves from their children. I want to be alone, right? right? Or our spouse is saying, like, I just want to be alone. Again, we're distancing ourselves from the people we desperately need to connect with, right? And if there's anything that we know from like years and years of work, is that children who feel neglected, they're just at risk of everything. So having that secure attachment with our children, with our loved ones, is really essential. What I'm trying to say is it's not the hardship itself that's bad. It's not the stressor itself that's bad. It's not the trauma itself that's traumatic, but it's your response to that trauma. It is the support system for you after that trauma. You think about the Sahaba, right? The Sahaba lost their best friends during war. They had as gift mutilated parts of their Sahaba. Like, here's the nose as a gift. Here's the head as a gift. That is pretty traumatizing. How many times do you hear about a Sahabi developing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder? Because think of the concept of suhbah, companionship. Think of that. Like, they were so close to like having their neighbors inherit each other. That's how much love they had for each other. So what is essential to remember is not how horrific the events are, is not how stressful things are, but it's that you are in control of providing the support system to become resilient from that same traumatic event, that you're actually going to grow. That is an option. A, B, all of the above, right? Okay. How do we manage burnout? Like, you're sitting here and you're thinking, oh, I think I'm kind of burned out. I think I'm emotionally burnt out. Like, you know, a friend will call me and say, I had a car accident. You're like, oh, okay, I hope you feel better. And I'm not feeling that, you know. And nurses will have this. After one of my seminar, I remember this nurse, she came up to me and she was in tears about this. And she says, you know what, during the pandemic, like, I don't feel compassion anymore for people. People will tell me I'm so depressed and I want to do bad things to myself, and I would have no feelings for them. She was beyond that point of compassion fatigue. She was beyond that point of burnout, right? So if you are in the helping field, you're a sheikh, you're a clerk, you're a lawyer fighting for, you know, care or something. You're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're an educator. All of these are helping fields that really need to work on compassion fatigue. So number one is that you need to find social support, right? Like what you're doing now. You're coming to the masjid, you're praying Isha at the masjid, you're sitting here and you're connecting over some common values. And then for parents, I really like to have a buddy system. So when your loved one walks in after school and says, I have something to say, you're able to, just before they come in, you call a friend and say, I am so angry right now at all these videos that I saw that I'm not sure if it can be supportive to anybody who walks through that door. I need to vent. It's 3:15, they're gonna walk into the door right now. Right? Having that buddy system of, I'll be your buddy, you will be my buddy on those kind of days. And giving yourself parental timeout. Now, parental timeout is not the same thing as saying, let's talk later, right? And, you know, and then you stay in the room. You want to make sure, because there's so much uncertainty, especially after the pandemic. There's so much uncertainty with what's happening now that you want to be as specific as possible if you can. So, you know what? Why don't you come back in 10 minutes exactly? And I'll be ready to have that conversation. That is specific. That's saying I need 10 minutes and come back in 10 minutes, not later, which never comes. Sometimes, especially for teens, right? Teenagers can come sometimes and bring attitude with them. I know that's like shocking for many parents of teenagers. But, you know, sometimes it helps when I look at their baby pictures, because that just softens the heart a little bit, right? And then also, whatever reduces stress for you, like stress management, is also very, very good. And being resourceful. Like, there are days that are just going to be really very difficult. So maybe these are the days that you have someone help you out with something, right? For children, if you have children or youth, some of the symptoms that might be concerning is if your child is like old enough, they've been, you know, trained, and they start to wet the bed, you know, after like, you know, months of being trained. That is a concerning sign. if they're starting to have nightmares, that is a concerning, and I've heard of that. I've heard of children having nightmares. You have to remember something, that children who are young, they don't know that Palestine is thousands of miles away. They think Palestine is the backyard. So they will say things like, I went to this Islamic camp and I was talking to kids, and this boy was how old? Maybe in 4th grade. And his ideas, he thinks that they're not gonna, I'm not gonna be scared. They're not gonna bomb us. They think that the enemy is like in our backyard. They don't have this concept of Palestine being thousands of miles away. So the fear is very real. And what they hear from the adults as we sit on the dining and people are talking, husband and wife, they hear all the scary things. Oh, you know what? These students, they got suspended for saying Free Palestine. This person got arrested. All they hear is threat, even if they don't understand exactly what's being said. So we also have to be mindful and conscious of the language we use, given how appropriate it is for the child's development, right? So nightmares. This boy was in maybe 3rd grade, and he had a nightmare that Israel came and that they killed his mom. Right? That's a very concerning nightmare for a child to have. And if their eating habits have changed, so they usually eat well, and all of a sudden they don't really have an appetite, or the opposite, that they eat a lot. If your child is usually very talkative and all of a sudden they're quiet, I know you're like, thank God this teenager stopped talking, but that could be a concerning sign if their personality completely changed like that, if they have any sleep difficulties, or if they start to be aggressive. Like a lot of children, they want to retaliate. They want it because they feel we're so weak. They want to retaliate, so they start hitting their siblings. They're basically displacing the aggression towards this other monster that they can't beat up, that they think is so big, and they project this on their older siblings. Again, instead of connecting with them during desperate times like this. Then you might hear older people say things like this. What is the point? Why would Allah do this? But if millions of Muslims are praying for Palestine, why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not accepting? Why would Allah allow thousands of children to die? Right? And you can see, or they'll say, why are we so weak? Why are they so strong? These are all things I've heard from youth, right? Because we can give inspirational talks, right? Like, there was, all this inspirational talks about how we're strong. And then I have, this young man texts me and he says, what is the speaker talking about? We're not strong. Because you know what? They are going to university. They don't have a voice. There's no freedom of speech, right? So it's really important to link, what does strong mean? It's not enough to say our ummah is strong. You have to give vivid example. What does strong mean? Well, strong means that when the director of the US State Department, the highest official that submits to Biden, says, I resign over this, which he did, by the way. Josh Paul resigned over this. He says, I'm not going to agree to basically sell weapons. I know that's killing children. He is the highest official in the USA government. He resigned because of this. That's what strong means, right? To see TikTokers convert to Islam, start reading the Quran. That's what strength looks like. To see the highest official in New York, United Nations say, this is class textbook definition of genocide, and I resign over this because I'm ashamed to work for the United Nations when it has no power. This is what strength looks like. When social media categorically is speaking up for this, this is what strength looks like. We have to be vivid. We can't use just like this amazing language about, but the youth is like, well, that's not what I'm seeing. Right? So we need to define, what does strength mean to them, right? And of course, questions like this, we can tell the youth, astaghfirullah, how can you think like that? Or we can really, take this as an opportunity to correct their aqidah, to explain that an ummah is not defined by the present moment, that you have relatives 1,000 years ago, and we have an ummah that goes on till Judgment's Day. Our ummah transcends space, and the present moment. There's a past, there's a future, there is, limitless. Right? So all of these things need to be corrected, and our youth need vivid examples from current time. And if we're going to use battles, right? Like, we got to connect this to the present moment. And I also want to say that whether you're an adult, youth, when they say, I'm very sad, that is okay. That is a normal feeling. In fact, you are fulfilling the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, because that's what we should do when someone who is Muslim is in pain, right? In accordance to the hadith. So to feel sad is a healthy, in fact, if you are not feeling sad because of this, I think you're a psychopath. I honestly do. And I worry about our society from people like that. Unfortunately, people like that exist out there who have no sadness and shame and guilt over thousands of children dying. If you feel angry, if you don't feel anger because of this, then what should you feel angry about? I don't think there's anything that's worthy of healthy anger than the current situation. That is a healthy emotion given current situation. Unfortunately, we do live in the West where we do define emotion in terms of negative emotions and positive emotions, right? Like, I teach psychology of emotion. There is a chapter on positive emotion. There's a chapter on negative emotion. And guess what? Sadness, anger are negative emotions. No, they're not. They're healthy emotions when the situation calls for that. If you are happy right now, right, then something is wrong with you. That's then a negative emotion. Right? We also in the West think of emotions very differently than in China, for example, than in our Arabic heritage, which you can't have two opposite, or what's defined as two opposite emotions exist together. And that's why I said I think there's sweetness in the pain that our ummah is experiencing right now. I know I felt that sweetness when I feel like, oh my God, we do have an ummah. All of a sudden, overnight, I felt like we are all related. We all have the same value system. Whether you are religious or not, whether you are the type of person who is fasting Mondays and Thursdays, reading Surah Al-Kahf on Friday, doing all of that, or you are but all of a sudden, we have this pride of our ummah, regardless of our religious status, of I care. This anger, this extreme sadness, regardless of how practicing you are, tells me that all of us care so much about our ummah. And that is a beautiful feeling that makes my soul as a Muslim feel like I am home. And what a sweet feeling to feel that you are home. If you're feeling frustrated, concerned, compassionate, these are normal emotion indicating that you are normal. Congratulations. And as I said, you are fulfilling the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to feel these feelings during such times. What is concerning though is, and what is not a part of the Islamic tradition, is to feel hopeless, helpless. Yes, is not from the ummah. Right? Now, these feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, that can take you down a really bad trajectory of depression and anxiety, all kind of inflammatory disorders. So we definitely don't want to have these kind of feelings, and we need to definitely redefine it. So when we say, I feel hopeless, we need to right away correct that narrative and ask the person, what do you mean by that? So when a young person, when the youth, when an adult says, oh, I really feel hopeless about this, what do you mean by this? Do you mean that the genocide is not going to end tomorrow? Right? That is within the ilm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You do what you do, and the outcome is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Genocide is going to end tomorrow. You plant the seeds, but let's not be selfish that we must collect the fruits during our lifetime. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Zalzala that if you do something as small as an atom, you can't even see the atom with your eyes. You need special tools to see an atom, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you. So to say that, you know what, well, I don't know, this is not doing enough, we're doing so little, that's not true. Right? If you're doing so little, then they wouldn't spend millions in social media to try to have ads that show up. And they do. They wouldn't pay TikTokers to say that I stand with Israel. The stocks for Starbucks would not be going down, and they wouldn't be going bankrupt in Morocco. Right? These are all I won, I won, I won. These are all winnings. Right? But we're expecting that winning is we collect the fruits where Gaza is free now in our lifetime. We're not like special that we need to like have this like to us right away. Our reward is immediate. Plant the seeds and have confidence that the fruits one day, whether it's during the season of our life when we're alive or much later, will be collected. And anybody who's going to collect it is still a part of your ummah. It's still a part of you. So let's talk a little bit about tools. I'm a big fan of budgeting time to be emotional. I don't care if you say I'm going to budget 1 hour to be emotional, because 1 hour to be worried is better than 24 hours in worry. But be specific. So typically, and I teach psychologists who treat like people with an anxiety, and one tool that I teach them is to say to their patient who have an anxiety, so the big thing is worry, right? Get a sticky note. I don't care if it's this big. They probably do exist. Mine is probably this big. And write on it between, decide. So let's say your task is like, I'm going to decide for 35 minutes, I'm going to worry. I'm going to have a timer for 35 minutes. I'm going to write on the sticky note. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about my kids going to Walmart. I'm worried about them, whatever. Everything, no matter how ridiculous it is, nobody's judging. You finish the 35 minutes, rip it up, trash. But 35 minutes, 45 minutes, 1 hour, 1 hour and a half is better than 24 hours. And don't say, well, okay, I'm going to start writing. Let's see how long it takes. No. With an anxiety, with worry, you want to be specific because it will take over your entire day. And we can't be frozen in the moment. That's what they want. We got to move forward. So when I when I post stuff on social media, I will have a dedicated time for me to check out the news, what's going on, make sure it's reputable resources. That's it. The rest of the day has to be me moving forward, me showing up for people that I love in my family and my community. Because being frozen in the moment, being compassionate, burnt out is not going to help anybody. So that goes with budgeting time for the news. And if you're already a person with a baggage of traumas and an anxiety, your budget should be less than me. Your budget should be less than the next person sitting next to you. You got to know yourself because you're the expert on you. You know that at one point you're going to lose it and you're going to have a nervous breakdown, which people have had. So your budget is going to be less, right? And then for students, like for the 2 students that came after one talk and they went to UCLA, when they're studying, I recommended that they also have a sticky note. I have sticky notes in all colors. And I said, like, your working memory, like all these interrupting thoughts of like, I can't believe this is happening. This is so unfair. The faculty at UCLA decided to design it. Put it, every time you have an interrupting thought, put it on a piece of paper. And, tell it, I'll attend to you later. I'll attend to you later. But it's not here. Because when you have interrupting thoughts and you allow them to stay there, it's kind of like if you have a lot of programs open on your computer and you're working on something, it slows it down. We don't want that. We don't want to be slowed down. Also, focus with what's within your control. I think we spend a lot of time focusing on everything outside our control. We spend hours and days and weeks focusing on everything we cannot do. Not nearly as much time on what we can do. Don't ever underestimate what you're doing. And I learned this from my Islamic studies teacher, may Allah bless him. I thought it was beautiful. He said it, of course, in Arabic a lot more eloquently than I can say it. But he said that many small actions that have pure, sincere intentions are bigger in the eyes of Allah than big actions that have insincere intentions. And I thought that is so beautiful and so empowering. So really have such a sincere intention to spread good information. You took your time to make sure that the resource and you post it with sincere intention. That may be so much bigger than somebody who's showing off and he's giving money, let's say. Okay. And and just take up every opportunity. Like, I was at the bank sitting with the teller, and then I just happened to have an interview with NPR after an NPR affiliate over this, what's happening. Oh, okay. I actually have to say the story, subhanAllah. I just reminded of this. So it's the long COVID, so thoughts just run away. At my work, I came back one time, and then I had all these emails at my work media of like wanting to do an interview for NPR to look at what happened at one of the rallies where in protesting and rally where someone was not even pushed, but he ended up dying, a Jewish man. So they wanted to know the emotional baggage around the Jewish man dying. So I just pretended I didn't see my email till after office hours. Nothing wrong with that. I made sure that she got somebody else. Then I emailed the person and I said, I'm sorry, I got this later. And but here's what I think we should talk about. And here's what I'm seeing in my community. I'm seeing re-traumatization of my community. I'm seeing moral injury like nobody's business. What I mean by moral injury is you being in a situation, for example, like our students at university, where they are put in a completely Zionist environment. They don't have free speech, but they know what's right and they can't say it. That creates tremendous moral injuries. I said, I see that happening. If you're ever interested in that story, please circle back. And she did. Do not waste any opportunity, no matter. I'm going to say, is she going to turn back and be like, well, and say, no? She could. She didn't in this instance. I was prepared for whatever she was going to say. You're sitting and you're having coffee and you're like, yes, you know what? This is my first time at your coffee shop. I don't go to Starbucks because blah, 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 blah. And you know what? So I'm going to try your latte. We're having that conversation. The person is interested. By the way, did you know there's a protest this weekend? Oh yeah, show me. And she takes a picture. True stories. Little interactions like that, right? That flow out of normal relationships, normal interactions. You also have to ask yourself, like when the Prophet ﷺ stood and said, if I told you that the enemy is behind me, nobody looked back. They believed him because he's the Sadiq al-Amin. Where were you before this happened? Where was your integrity, your honesty, your work ethics? Because if you have that trusting relationship, that you are always a man, a woman of integrity, then everything that comes out of your mouth is naturally honest. Why would you start lying now? Right? That would be very hard for somebody to think that I know you for so many years. You're an honest person. You're probably not going to lie about this. Right? So I think that's really, really important. And we probably should stop for question and answers, right? 45 minutes has been 45 minutes. 50 minutes Q&A. I don't know who's facilitating here. Nobody is facilitating? So, okay, then I will make the decision of stopping here so I can give you guys the chance to ask questions, inshallah. And hopefully I'll have answers. Maybe not. Jazakumullahu khairan. So if you have any questions, please bring them on. Yes.
So things start coming out, and then at school, and then you find out that your teacher's principal is a Zionist, and he's slipping in propaganda and brainwashing the children at the school. How do you deal with that?
One, quite honestly, I think that right now for our ummah, it's really important to work on our Islamic schools. It is really hard. It makes parenting so much harder when children do not go to Islamic school. But let's say for whatever reason, there's no judgment at all here. For whatever reason, your kids go to public school. You're going to your parenting job just tripled. Because not only are you connecting, you're also asking, oh, what English book are you reading at school? Right? Because you would have to check the synopsis. All the new youth book for preteens, teenagers, all of them is not about young. It's not about boy-girl love, which back in the days, my parents would be like, oh, that's bad. Now it's all about gays and lesbian love, all of it. I was looking for my 8th grader for a book to read for pleasure. I couldn't find one because I will sit and read the synopsis of each book before she's allowed to read it. That's a lot of work. right? So I have to go back. I have to ask people what you recommend. She has older siblings, so I was able to ask them, what are you reading in English? My daughter in high school, she also read a book that is written by an Iranian author about hijab. It wasn't positive. So looking into what they're reading is really important, correcting that, and you're going to be the rebel at school of saying, you know what, my kid is not comfortable. Also, this is the time to have your children speak up and say to the counselor, you know what, and you writing a letter saying that, you know, my child may act out of his or her normal character because the events that are happening right now are really affecting him, affecting her. At the school, your tax money goes so that they meet the individual requirements of every child. But if you never told them, how would they know? But now you have evidence saying that I sent you a letter saying they need extra care, that they are really affected by this, and that you need to provide the package that suits that. They're going to hear something at school. They're going to have to feel safe to come at home and say, here's what I learned at school, this. And you're going to have to sit one by one and not just say it's wrong, right? But you're going to have to show me it's wrong. It's really important. Like this generation, you really have to show them, to give plenty of example, which is a lot of work. But inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you immensely for doing that, right? And then it's also like, this is, and you can say that you can copy the script and say it word for word if you want to your child or to your teen, but something to the effect of, there's a lot of sadness you might feel. It might feel icky in your stomach or like butterflies in your stomach. You might not even know how to name your feeling. I don't always have the answers, right? But I want you to know that I love you so very, very much. And just remember that there's always a rainbow at the end of the storm for those who choose to see the rainbow. And I am there to allow you to see the rainbow, even if I can't answer your questions. So you don't have to give answers all the time. We don't have all the answers, but we can provide love. We can provide attentive listening ears. We can say that must feel terrible. I don't even know if I was in your situation, what I would say. Okay. Any other questions?
How do you deal with microaggressions where your colleagues might be pro-Israeli and they're making some comments? You don't want to be confrontational, pick up a fight, but at the same time, like, you cannot tolerate that.
Yep, absolutely. Let me give you a vivid example. So I teach right at university, and one time I'm going to, I'm walking to my classroom in the psychology building. I had just watched these videos. I am so very sad. And all I see, I don't know if you remember or if the flyers were put here at the masjid of the kidnapped. Did you guys see the kidnapped flyers? It's like a face on it and kidnapped. So, right. So I'm like, oh, haram, who would kidnap a 75-year-old? And it was all of the kidnapped, right, from Israel. So I got really angry because where's the other part of the story? If you're going to allow one side, I'm not going to say anything, but allow the other side. So I emailed my chair and I said, I want to meet with you today. And then I met with her. I actually wasn't going to even teach my last class because I was so angry. So I met with her after my class and I said to her, I just want to let you know, I don't feel psychologically safe. I don't feel psychologically safe to work. I have respected my position of authority in the classroom because that is authority, not to talk politics, but then you're allowing the other side to talk. So one, I want to know if the people who put the flyer had permission by the school, right? And of course, it was all like, oh, I don't know how to think about this, and I'm trying to be non-polarized. I'm like, I'm not asking you to choose sides. I just want to know if they have permission to put this. Because in my head, you have permission, I will get permission. I'll put children of Gaza on there. She emailed a couple of days later and said, actually, they don't have permission. She had someone peel off all of the flyers from the entire psychology department. All of them were gone. I didn't go and be angry. I didn't say anything. I didn't go and say, well, you put this, I'm going to put this. Not only that, it was actually on the, in San Diego, they're actually being looked into this in hate crime. So I sent her that as well. And then I said, I want also a police report. Not only do I want you to take them up, but I want a police report. Because I sit in office hours. What if somebody comes by my office and does something? Why would my kids would have to pay that price? So you have to be concrete and not reactionary and document everything, right? And you can say to your human resources, I don't feel psychologically safe because these comments are being said, and I don't feel like I'm on equal footing to respond back. What do you recommend I do? He will send a memo of saying, don't use this language in the office. Your colleagues are being uncomfortable. Because now the ball is in her court. She has to correct that. She has to do something about your complaint, right? But if the complaint is in our brain only, and if our pain is in our hearts only, people don't telepathically hear our brains and our hearts, right? You have to say it, right? Yes.
Since you mentioned that you deal with graduate students, and I attend USC, which is also another big Zionist presence there. How do you support the minority Muslim students that are struggling to move on with their life and to do their work, but at the same time are scared to speak up, especially if they're not from LA or from outside? LA culture sometimes could be hard for people that are not from LA. So how do you support those students?
You listen, you provide a safe place for them to sit and cry on your shoulder and listen, and always look for, okay, we can't do this, that's good, but look, what is within our control? What can we do? Your job is not to think about, is this big or small, what we're gonna do, but what can we do, regardless of its size. You said graduate students. So after one of my talks, I think this was in Irvine, we finished this, 2 graduate students from UCLA, they came up, and one of the students was actually in tears. And she said that her professor started the class by saying categorically, absolutely, they are with Israel, not mentioning anything about the compassion for the children in Gaza who died. And she said, I had to close my camera and started crying. Do you know what she's studying? Her PhD, this professor, her PhD is in peace studies. Her PhD. Look at the moral injury of I am sitting, listening to a professor who's in a place of authority to endorse a position I completely disagree with. Not only that, in service of learning about peace studies. That stings. That hurts a lot. Okay. Any other questions from this side? You're welcome. Before I return to the other side. Okay, you guys can ask them.
How do you categorize the state of the Ummah that it took them? Gaza is not like, this is not the first time Gaza is going through what it's going. How do you describe the Ummah, like for the past 50 years, when there are other parts of the world suffered 2-3 times of invasion for over and over and over, like daily bombardment, and nobody cared as the Ummah. Like, how do you categorize it? Like, is this again, like Palestinians have to pay the price for the Ummah to bring the suffering of the rest of the Ummah? Like to be. Okay. But still, I don't see anybody else talking about any other suffering in the world. That's, like, I'm not saying to take away the lenses of the camera of the person. I'm saying the lenses somewhere else as well. Like, we need time. Put it on Yemen, put it on Kashmir. Like before pandemic, they are in pandemic, they are in quarantine. And I don't know what's going on with them. I don't know. All I hear is they are in lockdown, still in lockdown. Like, why does it, like take for why Gaza should be like the sacrifice for like for us to wake up, but we are still not awake.
So here's what I'm going to say to this. Obviously, I'm in no position to judge the Ummah, but what I'll say is I'm not going to think about the past where we were, because I'm seeing.
That's my question. Like, what should it take me to see anything else? Should be only images?
Right. But I think your own homework is really important. I think also to remember that Islam is against oppression anywhere, right? So you're showing up for anyone who's oppressed anywhere, right? That's really, really important to instill on our kids. So when we teach our kids about what's happening, we say we're not only standing with Palestinians because they're Muslims, because if it's our first qibla, but because we're always with the oppressed.
Whenever we would go to the khutbah, she would always, like complain. She's a white American convert. But the imam of like some particular masajid would only make dua for her ummah outside of the United States. And it was so alarming for her back in 2001, 2009. She said, how come those khatibs, they don't make dua for this ummah right here, brothers? We always focus on something else. So same thing is now happening. Is like if we make the dua, we only make the dua for Palestine. We don't add other suffering across the world.
No, they are. Actually, it's just because that it's on social media. If they open our eyes, actually, like they are. Like, it's tough because Palestine, they have to take that.
That's what I'm saying. And we don't have the pictures from Kashmir. We don't have the pictures from the 20 years of war in Afghanistan. We don't have the pictures from Yemen. We don't have.
So I think what you're seeing on social media is always a reflection of like who you're following, right? Like, so that's also one thing. I just know that when they're making the dua, they're usually praying for the ummah in various parts. I do think though that what your friend said, that we do have to make also dua for the ummah here as well. I think that is a good point. And I'm sure like if she gently gives that feedback, that the sheikh would definitely make dua, right? So no, that's a good point. Any other? Yes. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum.
Always we have a lot of people, they come to us
Mhm.
and they said that the feeling that they're having when they watch videos and photos, there's a lot of depression and stress is coming to them, the time they spend with this video. So the question is, do you suggest any habit or any practices that a person's supposed to do in case if he come across these videos that bring a lot of stress in his heart, like the moment that they saw these videos, should they suppose, let's say, do not watch at all? Or if they watch, is there anything that they can do it to remove this stress?
So we talked about this a little bit when I was talking about tools, is that you have to have a budget. You cannot be spending your entire day watching these videos, and you have to be conscious of what you are able to handle. So if you are already a person who has a big baggage, a big history of trauma, you have an anxiety disorder, you shouldn't really be spending a lot of time watching these videos. We can't be frozen, right? Like, and if watching these videos are going to keep us frozen, we have to be moving forward. What am I doing that actually makes me move forward? If I'm noticing that watching these videos are not making me move forward, then should I continue, right? There's a difference between getting the information to be informed and being frozen in the moment that never ends, the entire day, right?
Yeah, like sometimes, let's say he put a budget of time and one video stick in his mind or in her mind, it's really affect badly on their, lifestyle. And when we want to help these people out in this sense, is it spiritual perspective, or also there is some other like psychological thing that we can, let's say, adjust or advise to, they can practice it to overcome, that video that they have seen?
First of all, of their children, I was saying earlier that child, when they're like young children, they are not aware that Palestine is thousands of miles away. They think Palestine is down the street. So if they're bombing there, they may be bombing my house. They may be killing my mother, who I love very dearly. That's what I hear from children. So of course you are the parent and you do what works for you, but I would strongly argue that children should not watch these videos, for sure. Now, for older people and youth, you have to ask yourself, you're watching these videos for what reason, right? And if you're finding that, like, I'm a sensitive person, so like my nervous system is sensitive. So when I watch things, I am like that person you described. The video plays in my head over and over. I will see the frames. I will have nightmares. I can't work, right? And it takes over me. I know that about myself, so I have to limit that. So a big part of it is knowing yourself. Some people are able to handle that, right? And able then to talk about it. What is the purpose of what you're doing is really important. What is the meaning of what you're doing, right?
You mentioned a more on injury.
Yeah.
And it's funny that I've been having this feeling every time I go to work, but I didn't have a word for
Yes.
it. And then
I made it
I
up.
had to explain. But good, I think it serves the purpose of
Yeah.
the feeling. How do we deal with it? How do we go to work? How do we be normal in trying to maybe not ignore, but
Yeah.
put aside, as you said, like put it on the post-it, but that distinction is really hard.
Well, so one other technique that I really love is that for any disorder, not just for an anxiety, that I tell therapists to use with their patients, is to kind of like have 3 values that no matter how bad the things get, you will never compromise these 3 values. So for me, for example, being honest, kind, and genuine is really important, which means that honest is a big thing for me. So at the beginning of all of this, when nobody was saying anything about it, I had to really think about, can I then, talk about this in social media? What does that mean? And then so at the time I was going to therapy and I actually discussed it with my therapist. And in my head, well, being honest is a value that I value. Is one of the 3 values that I promised myself I will never compromise. Well, that has a cost. So I had to practice the honesty regardless of the cost, which means also I'm authentic. So I had to go to my chair and say, listen, I don't feel psychologically safe. And here is why. I'm not saying I want you to go and be pro-Palestinian. I want you to send an email. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about me. She can't take away that from me. She can't say, why? You should feel psychologically safe. She can't say, no, you shouldn't feel sad. She can't take away that. But I want to document that. I want to document I'm not feeling psychologically safe. Say I'm feeling morally injured. I am feeling like, I'm trying to respect being professional at work and ethical, but when this and this happens, it really, really, has a cost for me emotionally. So being authentic like that, from my experience, most people really respect that, even when they disagree with you. So she might not endorse your opinion. She might not be pro-Palestinian, but she will have to respect because that's her job, right? She has to do something about your complaint. So that would be what I would do. Okay. All right. Jazakum Allah khairan. It's 9 o'clock. So Jazakum Allah
Jazakallah khair,
khairan.
Dr. Marwa. May Allah bless you. Bless your effort.
Jazakum Allah khairan.
Also, if the man can help us, Jazakumullah khair, with the table and chairs. May Allah bless you also. Jazakumullah khair.
These are like my favorite supplications during this time. If you want to like also take them, I really love these supplications a lot. اللهم اجعل سريرتي خيرا من علانيتي واجعل علانيتي صالحة. To like work on your intention, because that's a struggle for me. So I always say that, and Allah bless my teachers. اللهم إني أبرأ إليك من كل حول لي وقوة وأشكر لحولك وقوتك, because you're teaching me weak. So you're fighting in Allah's strength, right? And then اللهم استعملنا ولا تستبدلنا. These are my favorite ones.